Chapter 1. The Quiet Years. 8 long years had settled over Kira Voss's life like a heavy cloak, thick and suffocating, draping over her once vibrant spirit and muffling the echoes of a past she could neither forget nor face. In those 8 years, she had mastered the art of invisibility, not the glamorous kind of stealth afforded by fancy cloaking devices or high-tech gadgetry, but the more painful, exhausting kind born from fear, regret, and a desperate need for anonymity. She had vanished from the vast tapestry of interstellar fame and whispered legend, retreating to Earth's sprawling urban jungles where millions crowded and identities dissolved into a faceless multitude. Here, no one knew of Kira Voss the pilot, the daring ace who had once danced on the razor's edge of space combat and outmaneuvered fleets twice her size. Here, she was simply Kira, an unremarkable mechanic's assistant scraping by in a dimly lit workshop tucked away in a forgotten corner of a city that never slept but never quite woke either. The sharp clang of metal on metal, the acrid scent of burnt circuitry, and the steady hum of power converters had replaced the intoxicating rush of engines thrumming beneath her fingertips and the infinite velvet blackness dotted with stars she once called home. The days blurred into one another, marked by routine repairs and whispered conversations with drones and rusted parts rather than the roar of a starship's thrusters or the frantic orders barked over comm channels. She buried the pilot deep within herself, locking her skills away like a forbidden relic, convinced that any flicker of that life would draw unwanted attention, open wounds long sealed, and perhaps even invite the reckoning she so desperately feared. Yet, even in her self-imposed exile, Kira's mind wandered endlessly to the stars. Every night, when the city's neon glow dimmed and the distant hum of traffic faded, she would climb to the rooftop of the dilapidated apartment she called home and stare skyward, searching for constellations obscured by pollution but vivid in her memory. She could almost feel the pull of the cosmos, the silent call of distant worlds, the hum of ancient engines, the whisper of infinite possibilities just beyond reach. In those stolen moments, the past came rushing back, the camaraderie of her crew, the reckless joy of evading enemy fire, the crushing weight of loss that had shattered everything. It was that loss that drove her away, that forced her into the shadows. A mission gone wrong, a betrayal that had left her ship crippled and her comrades dead, and her own name smeared across the interstellar logs as a scapegoat for a disaster no one dared investigate too closely. The systems she once protected turned their backs, and the pilots who had admired her now whispered her name with a mixture of pity and blame. In that crucible of pain, she made the hardest choice of all to disappear. But the universe, as vast and indifferent as it was, had a way of pulling its lost children back into the fray. The first sign came unexpectedly. A coded message slipped into the circuit boards of a broken repair drone she was fixing, a sequence of numbers and coordinates that danced like a ghost in the machine. At first, she dismissed it as a malfunction, a corrupted data stream from some forgotten system. But the message persisted, subtle yet insistent, woven into the static of her every project, as if the very machinery around her was trying to speak. Curiosity gnawed at her. She decoded the message slowly, every line pulling her deeper into a puzzle she hadn't dared face. The coordinates pointed beyond the solar system, into the dark heart of known space where human ships were rare and alien fleets ruled the void. The message was a summons, an urgent call from a faction she had never encountered, speaking in a language of urgency and desperation, pleading for her skills as a pilot. For nights, Kira wrestled with the decision. To answer would be to risk everything, her anonymity, her fragile peace, her very life. Yet to ignore the call felt like betraying the part of herself she had tried so hard to bury. The pilot in her stirred, aching to take flight once more, to push the boundaries of human reach and reclaim the freedom she had lost. It was a freedom that came with a price. Before she could fully grasp what awaited, the city around her was shattered by a sudden incursion, a fleet of alien vessels unlike any she had ever seen, descending upon Earth's orbit with an intimidating precision and silent menace. Communication blackout zones flickered across the globe as these unknown forces enforced a blockade, trapping humanity in a cage of stars. And in the eye of this cosmic storm, Kira was no longer a shadow in the crowd. She was found, Dragged from the fragile safety of her workshop by agents of the alien coalition, they brought her before a council that recognized the skills they so desperately needed. They forced her into the cockpit of an ancient but powerful starfighter, awakening memories and reflexes long dormant. The pilot within her roared back to life, fierce and unyielding, as she realized that hiding was no longer an option. The fate of worlds and her own survival depended on reclaiming the stars she had forsaken. Kira's days blurred into a monotonous haze of mundane tasks that scarcely concealed the storm raging within her. The city around her was a sprawling labyrinth of concrete and steel, humming with neon lights and the restless footsteps of millions. Yet it felt emptier than the vastest reaches of space she once called home. She had learned to weave herself into this tapestry of anonymity with painstaking care, choosing drab clothes that deflected attention, keeping her head low, and abandoning the confident gait of a starship pilot for the cautious shuffle of someone who had no past worth remembering. Even her name, once emblazoned across interstellar news feeds and battle reports, was shelved beneath a pseudonym so bland it invited no curiosity. In the crowded cafes and back-alley markets, she was simply Kira, a mechanic's assistant, a shadow among shadows, a ghost no one looked for. Yet beneath that carefully constructed facade, the memories clung like stubborn stardust, fractured snapshots of adrenaline-fueled space battles, the vibrant camaraderie of her crew, the deafening silence of loss. She remembered the sharp smell of burning ozone mingling with the acrid scent of plasma fire, the frantic chorus of alarms as her ship's hull tore open under enemy assault, and the final, shattering moments when her friends were torn from her by cold, merciless void. Those memories were etched into her bones, a painful compass that guided her into exile but refused to let her forget who she was. Her hands, once steady and precise on the throttle and flight controls, now fumbled over circuits and soldering irons in the dim glow of the workshop. The tactile world of engines and wiring was both a balm and a reminder, a way to keep her fingers busy while her mind replayed the endless loop of regret and guilt. Kira blamed herself for what happened, convinced that if she had been faster, smarter, more daring, the tragedy could have been averted. That blame was a weight she bore in silence, a shadow that darkened every moment of solitude. Isolation became her only companion. Friends were a luxury she could not afford. Trust was a currency she had long ago spent and found bankrupt. The city's relentless pace and indifferent crowds provided a kind of protection when no one knew your story. They had no reason to pry. But even in the anonymity, she felt the sting of invisibility. It was as if she was drifting through life in a ghost ship, crewless and adrift, watching others live while she remained tethered to a past that would not release her. Then came the message, a whisper in the static, a fragment of code hidden in the most unlikely places. At first, she thought it was a glitch, a corrupted signal from some outdated system. But it persisted, a steady pulse beneath the noise of her daily grind. The coordinates it revealed led far beyond the familiar borders of Earth's space lanes, into territories uncharted and dangerous. The message carried an urgency that pulled at something buried deep inside her, the faint, almost forgotten thrill of flight, the call of the stars that had once defined her existence. Curiosity, that dangerous and irresistible force, took hold. She decoded the message piece by piece, unraveling its secrets with a mixture of dread and hope. It was a plea, a call for a pilot with skills rare and precious, someone who could navigate the treacherous void and stand against an unknown threat. The sender was anonymous, but the desperation behind the words was unmistakable. It spoke of alliances forged in shadow, of battles waged in silence, and of a fate that hung precariously in the balance. Kira was torn. To respond meant tearing down the walls she had built, exposing herself to dangers she had long sought to avoid. But to ignore it was to deny a part of herself that refused to die, a part that still dreamed of soaring beyond the atmosphere, of feeling the hum of engines beneath her fingertips and the infinite blackness of space stretching out before her. The pilot inside her stirred, restless and insistent, whispering promises of redemption and purpose. Her hesitation shattered the moment the skies above Earth darkened with the arrival of alien warships, massive, ominous vessels that blotted out the stars and sealed off the planet in a suffocating blockade. Communication networks faltered under their silent assault, and panic rippled through the cities below. Humanity, so confident in its isolation, was suddenly at the mercy of forces beyond comprehension. In the chaos, Kira's carefully hidden life unraveled. Agents of the alien coalition found her, her skills unmistakable despite years of concealment. They brought her before a council that recognized not the woman hiding in the shadows, but the pilot whose reflexes and courage could tip the balance of a conflict she had once tried to leave behind. There was no choice, no negotiation, only the cold reality that the galaxy's fate rested on her shoulders once more. Dragged into the cockpit of an ancient but formidable starfighter, Kira felt the old rush flood through her veins, the tactile surge of controls under her hands, the familiar hum of power coursing through systems long dormant. The past and present collided violently within her as memories flashed, emotions surged, and a fierce determination took hold. She was no longer a shadow. She was the pilot she had always been, forced by circumstance but empowered by resolve to reclaim the stars she had forsaken. The universe had pulled her back into its endless dance. Whether she was ready or not, Kira Voss was no longer hiding. Chapter 2. The Awakening. The cockpit was both a prison and a sanctuary, an intricate cage of polished metal and glowing interfaces that seemed to pulse with life beneath Kira's fingertips. As the hatch sealed shut behind her, the familiar scent of electronics, ionized air, and recycled oxygen filled her senses, stirring echoes of a life she had tried desperately to forget. The consoles blinked softly in the dim lighting, holographic displays flickering with star maps, weapon systems, and cryptic alien scripts that danced tantalizingly just beyond her understanding. This was no ordinary ship. It bore the scars of centuries, its design alien yet hauntingly familiar, like a ghost ship from forgotten wars. But it was alive, and it needed a pilot. Kira's heart thundered not with fear, but with a rekindled fire that had smoldered beneath the ashes of years spent hiding. Every muscle, every nerve, remembered the feel of controls, the subtle pressure needed to coax impossible maneuvers from the ship's intricate systems. Her eyes darted across the panels, rapidly assimilating data, calibrating the starfighter's ancient engines, and syncing her neural interface with the vessel's core. The aliens who had forced her into this role watched from a distance, their expressions unreadable, as if weighing the fate of a galaxy on the skill of a single human. Outside, the cosmos stretched in endless darkness, pierced by the cold light of distant stars and the eerie glow of massive warships that blockaded Earth. The tension in the void was palpable, a silent war waiting to erupt, and Kira felt the weight of responsibility settle like lead in her chest. This was more than a fight for survival, it was a chance for redemption, a chance to prove that the mistakes of the past would not define her future. Her fingers moved instinctively over the controls, awakening dormant systems with a gentle touch. The ship hummed to life, thrumming with latent power that seemed eager to obey her command. She felt the ship's spirit align with hers, a symbiotic dance of flesh and machine, pilot and starfighter united in purpose. For the first time in years, the stars were not distant dreams, but immediate realities, shimmering pathways to freedom and defiance. Memories surged unbidden of tight formation flights through asteroid fields, of battles where split-second decisions meant the difference between life and oblivion, of comrades lost and promises broken. But those memories no longer weighed her down. Instead, they steeled her resolve. She was no longer the woman who had fled into obscurity. She was a warrior reborn, forged anew in the crucible of necessity. The Alien Council's envoy approached, speaking in a clipped tone layered with urgency. They explained that the blockade was the prelude to an invasion, that Earth's defenses were unprepared, and that only by striking at the heart of the enemy's command fleet could they hope to turn the tide. Kira's role was clear: lead a small squadron of allied ships, infiltrate enemy lines, and deliver a decisive blow. She absorbed their words with clinical precision, but beneath her calm exterior, a storm raged. The stakes were unimaginable, the risks immense. Failure meant not only her death, but the possible extinction of her homeworld and countless others. Yet, in that crucible of pressure, something remarkable happened. Her fear transmuted into clarity, her hesitation into action. As the squadron assembled, Kira found herself standing among aliens of myriad shapes and sizes, warriors from distant systems united by a shared desperation. They looked to her not as a stranger or a captive, but as a leader, a symbol of hope born from the ashes of disgrace. The irony was not lost on her, and yet she embraced it. The pilot who had hidden for 8 years was now thrust into the eye of a cosmic storm, a beacon in the darkness. The engines roared as the squadron slipped past Earth's atmosphere, cutting through the silence of space toward the looming enemy fleet. Kira's mind sharpened with each passing moment, her senses heightened, every instinct honed for the battle ahead. She was no longer hiding. She was flying, fighting, living, and the universe would never forget her again. The stars stretched endlessly before her, pinpricks of cold light scattered across the black velvet of space, indifferent witnesses to the fragile dance of war and survival unfolding beneath their gaze. Kira's hands were steady on the controls, fingers moving with a fluid precision born of years at the helm, each input a delicate command weaving the starfighter through the void. The hum of the engines thrummed in harmony with her heartbeat, a steady rhythm that pushed back the shadows of doubt creeping at the edges of her mind. Around her, the alien squadron formed like a living constellation, ships sleek and jagged, their designs as varied as the species that commanded them, yet all bound by a single purpose. The tension was palpable, thick enough to taste, as if the very vacuum of space bristled with the weight of impending conflict. Eyes some glowing, some multifaceted watched her from neighboring cockpits, silent prayers and desperate hopes entwined with the electric hum of weapons systems powering up. Kira's thoughts flickered to the years she had spent hiding, years when the only battles she fought were internal, against guilt, fear, and the relentless erosion of identity. Now, thrust into the eye of a galactic storm, those years seemed like a distant dream, a forgotten chapter overshadowed by the immediacy of survival. The woman who had once fled was no more. Here, in the cold expanse of space, the pilot within her was reborn, fierce, focused, unyielding. The alien envoy's voice crackled through the comm, clipped and urgent. Enemy flagship detected. Coordinates locked. Prepare for engagement. The words cut through the silence like a sharpened blade, igniting the spark that set the squadron into motion. Kira's fingers danced over the control panel, initiating weapons checks, aligning targeting arrays, and activating defensive shields that shimmered with ethereal light. The cockpit was alive with a symphony of alerts and signals, each a vital note in the impending cacophony of battle. As they approached the enemy formation, a swirling tempest of warships bristling with weaponry, Kira's mind sharpened to a razor's edge. She reviewed every protocol, every tactic she had mastered in a lifetime of flying, each one a tool to outwit and outmaneuver foes far more numerous and better equipped. The enemy fleet was imposing, a fortress of steel and fire that sought to crush any hope of resistance. But Kira saw beyond the daunting exterior. She saw vulnerabilities hidden in the gaps between ships, weaknesses in the rhythm of their patrols, and opportunities born of chaos. "Stay tight," she commanded, voice steady and resolute. "Trust your systems. Trust each other. We strike hard, then vanish." The squadron surged forward, weaving through the enemy lines with a grace that belied the deadly stakes. Kira's ship sliced through space like a blade, laser cannons firing precise bursts that shredded enemy fighters before they could react. Explosions blossomed around her, vibrant bursts of light against the darkness, as she led her squadron deeper into the heart of the hostile fleet. The battle was a furious storm, chaotic, relentless, and unforgiving. Enemy fighters swarmed like angry hornets, missiles streaked through the void, and energy shields flickered under the onslaught. Kira's every sense was engaged, a whirlwind of calculations and instincts guiding her through maneuvers that pushed her ship beyond its limits. She danced between death and victory, each second a razor-thin margin that demanded perfection. Amid the chaos, memories surfaced, not the haunting losses that had driven her away, but moments of camaraderie, of hope, and unbreakable will. She fought not just for survival, but for redemption, for the chance to reclaim the life that had been stolen. Every enemy downed, every evasive twist, Every calculated strike was a step toward that fragile light at the end of the tunnel. As the flagship loomed closer, Kira knew the true test was at hand. She had to breach its defenses, plant a disruptive charge in its core systems, and escape before the entire fleet collapsed upon them. The mission was perilous, but failure was not an option. With a fierce cry that echoed in the quiet confines of her cockpit, Kira pushed forward, the pilot she had hidden for 8 years blazing into the void once more unstoppable, unbroken, and ready to face whatever darkness awaited. Chapter 3: Into the Fire. The assault on the enemy flagship was a tempest of chaos and calculated fury, a ballet of destruction choreographed by Kira's steady hand and unyielding will. As her starfighter plunged through the outer defenses, the ship responded like a living creature, shuddering under fire but bending to her every command. The vast hull of the enemy vessel loomed before her, a monstrous citadel of steel and plasma, its surface a labyrinth of turrets, energy barriers, and sensor arrays designed to snuff out any intruder. Yet, beneath its imposing exterior, Kira spotted the subtle flickers of vulnerability, weak points masked by layers of advanced technology, but still exposed to a mind keen enough to exploit them. Her neural interface synced flawlessly with the starfighter systems, flooding her mind with streams of data target trajectories, shield frequencies, heat signatures painting a vivid picture of the battlefield in real time. Every calculation was swift, every decision razor-sharp. She led her squadron in a coordinated strike, weaving through concentrated enemy fire to deliver precise bursts that crippled critical systems and severed communication arrays. The flagship shuddered under their assault, its defenses faltering like a great beast wounded but still dangerous. Inside the cockpit, Kira's pulse was a metronome of calm amid the storm, her breathing controlled, her senses heightened. Memories of her past missions, the exhilaration, the fear, the bonds forged in the crucible of combat fueled her resolve. She remembered the faces of her lost crew, their laughter and courage, and she vowed to honor them with every maneuver, every shot fired. The pilot who had hidden in the shadows was gone. In her place stood a warrior reborn, fierce and unrelenting. As they breached the flagship's outer hull, a torrent of alarm klaxons and warning lights flooded her display. Automated defense drones erupted from hidden bays, swarming like mechanical wasps intent on destruction. Kira's fingers danced across the controls, deploying countermeasures and flares, guiding her ship through a deadly maze of missiles and energy blasts. Her squadron flanked her, engaging the drones with coordinated precision, a storm of fire and motion that blurred the lines between hunter and hunted. The moment to plant the charge arrived with terrifying immediacy. Navigating through the labyrinthine corridors of the flagship's internal systems, Kira guided her fighter into a docking bay long abandoned, but still wired into the ship's critical core. Her hands were steady as she deployed the disruptor charge, a compact device designed to cripple the flagship's power systems and disable its ability to command the fleet. Every second stretched into eternity as she initiated the countdown, the quiet hum of the charge contrasting sharply with the cacophony of battle raging outside. With the charge armed, the real challenge began. Escape. The flagship's automated security systems awakened in fury, sealing bulkheads and unleashing deadly countermeasures to trap the intruder. Kira's ship was caught in a deadly gauntlet of plasma turrets, energy nets, and collapsing corridors. Her every instinct screamed to flee, but the path was blocked, forcing her into a desperate dance of evasive maneuvers and calculated risks. Through the chaos, a surge of unexpected clarity swept over her. The years of hiding, the pain and regret, the fear of facing the past, they all melted away in the crucible of survival. Here, in the heart of the enemy's lair, Kira was whole again. She was pilot, warrior, survivor. With a final, heart-stopping burst of speed, she blasted through the collapsing bay, narrowly escaping the maelstrom of destruction. The disruptor charge detonated moments later, a brilliant cascade of energy that rippled through the flagship's systems, sending shockwaves that echoed across the enemy fleet. The flagship faltered, its grip on the blockade weakening, and for the first time in weeks, hope flared across the cosmos. As Kira regrouped with her squadron in the relative safety of open space, Her mind swirled with a complex storm of triumph and exhaustion. The mission had succeeded, but the war was far from over. She had been forced back into the cockpit, thrust into a conflict that demanded everything she had, and yet she knew this was only the beginning of a journey that would test her in ways she had never imagined. For the first time in 8 years, Kira Voss looked to the stars with fierce determination, not as a fugitive hiding from her past, but as a pilot ready to reclaim her place in the vast, unforgiving universe. The corridors of the enemy flagship were a cold labyrinth of steel and shadow, humming with latent power and bristling with unseen dangers. Kira's starfighter, though battered and scarred from the assault, responded instinctively to her every command as she navigated the claustrophobic docking bay, weaving between catwalks and emergency bulkheads that threatened to slam shut at any moment. The air outside the cockpit was thick with tension, the oppressive silence punctuated only by the distant echoes of alarm klaxons and the low rumble of engines powering up. It was a haunting reminder that she was deep within the belly of a beast far more formidable than anything she had ever faced before. Her mind raced through protocols and contingencies as the neural interface relayed streams of data weapon status, power levels, enemy movements, each byte fueling her split-second decisions. Despite the physical confines of the ship, her senses expanded into a realm of heightened awareness, a symphony of information that blended past experience with present necessity. The memory of her fallen crew was a quiet chorus in the background, urging her forward, reminding her of the stakes that stretched beyond her own survival. She was no longer alone. Her past and present converged in a singular purpose. The disruptor charge she had planted pulsed softly on her console, a beacon of hope amid the darkness. Yet, as she prepared for her escape, the ship's automated defenses sprang to life with ruthless efficiency. Swarms of drone sentinels emerged from concealed ports, their sleek frames glinting under harsh floodlights as they converged in a deadly ballet of pursuit. Kira's hands moved with practiced grace, deploying flares and jamming pulses while weaving through a deadly gauntlet of plasma fire and electromagnetic traps. The hum of the starfighter's thrusters became a steady heartbeat, propelling her through the labyrinth with a blend of desperation and determination. Her squadron's coordinated firepower provided fleeting relief, their laser bursts carving paths through the relentless swarm. Each maneuver was a dance of survival-evasive spirals, rapid decelerations, and split-second target acquisitions that tested the limits of both pilot and machine. The line between hunter and hunted blurred as the enemy unleashed every weapon in its arsenal to contain the breach. But Kira's resolve was unyielding. Failure was not an option. As the corridors twisted and collapsed behind her, sealing the path to the core, a sudden surge of energy flooded the bay, an overwhelming electromagnetic pulse designed to incapacitate all electronics within range. Kira's systems flickered violently, alarms shrieking as control momentarily slipped from her grasp. In those critical seconds, instinct overrode hesitation. She engaged manual overrides, recalibrated power flows, and wrestled the starfighter back from the brink of paralysis. Her breath was ragged, heart pounding as if trying to escape the confines of her chest, but her focus remained razor-sharp. Breaking free from the collapsing bay, Kira soared into open space just as the disruptor detonated in a cascade of blinding light and cascading energy waves. The flagship shuddered, its systems cascading into failure as the charge severed vital circuits and communications. The ripple of destruction spread like wildfire, shaking the enemy fleet and fracturing the blockade. In that instant, hope ignited not just for Earth, but for every corner of the galaxy oppressed beneath alien tyranny. Yet, even as adrenaline surged and victory loomed, a deeper transformation took root within Kira. The years of exile, the self-imposed isolation, and the crushing weight of regret had forged her into something new, an amalgam of past pain and present strength. She was no longer a pilot hiding in shadows, but a beacon blazing through the darkness, ready to reclaim her legacy and fight for a future reborn. As she regrouped with her squadron, the vastness of space stretched endlessly around them, a reminder that the war was far from over. But in that boundless expanse, Kira found a renewed sense of purpose. She was no longer running from her past. She was racing toward her destiny, one star at a time. Chapter 4: Redemption Among the Stars. The stars were cold and indifferent, scattered like distant diamonds across the infinite black canvas of space. Yet for Kira Voss, they had never seemed more alive, more filled with possibility, purpose, and hard-won hope. The battle that had nearly torn her apart now felt like a distant storm, replaced by a quiet clarity that settled in her bones. The ship beneath her was battle-scarred but resilient, a testament to the countless trials it had endured alongside her. More importantly, Kira herself had emerged from the crucible not broken, but reforged, scarred but unyielding, haunted but unbowed. As the remnants of the enemy fleet scattered and fled, fractured and leaderless, a cautious optimism began to take root among the Allied forces. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, humanity and its allies tasted the fragile sweetness of victory. Kira's leadership had turned the tide in a war that had seemed hopeless, and yet she knew the fight was far from over. The galaxy was a vast battlefield, and shadows lingered in the corners of every system, waiting for cracks to exploit. But in that moment, as the light of distant suns filtered through the viewport, Kira allowed herself to breathe, to feel the pulse of life and the steady beat of a heart no longer shackled by fear or regret. Her squadron gathered around her, a diverse mosaic of beings bound by mutual respect and shared survival. They looked to her not just as a pilot, but as a symbol of resilience and defiance. And for the first time in years, Kira felt truly seen, not as a fugitive from her past, but as a warrior who had reclaimed her place among the stars. She reached out through the comms, her voice steady and calm as she issued orders for regrouping and resupply. The war would continue, and there were many battles ahead, but Kira was ready. The pilot who had hidden her identity for 8 years was no longer running. She had faced the darkness, embraced her scars, and soared beyond them. The stars were calling once more, and this time, she would answer not as a shadow, but as a beacon blazing defiantly into the vast unknown. The quiet moments after battle were deceptive, a fragile calm stretched thin over the aftermath of chaos, offering only the illusion of peace. Kira sat alone in the cockpit, the glow of the control panels casting long shadows across her determined face. Outside, the stars twinkled indifferently, as if unaware of the war and hope entwined in the small vessel that bore her name. Yet inside, a fire burned brighter than any star, the fire of a woman who had reclaimed her soul from the edge of despair. She replayed the mission over and over in her mind, analyzing every decision, every maneuver that had saved her squadron and shattered the enemy's grip. The weight of command settled heavy on her shoulders, but it was a burden she no longer sought to escape. Instead, it fueled a fierce resolve to lead, to fight not just for survival, but for the freedom of countless worlds shackled under alien domination. Around her, the crew moved with quiet efficiency, their faces etched with exhaustion but lit by hope. They had followed her through the darkness, trusted a leader who was once lost to the past, but now forged anew by fire. Kira met their eyes, seeing reflected the same spark that had reignited within herself. Together, they were more than a squadron. They were the spark that could kindle a revolution. She rose from her seat, stepping onto the bridge where the alien coalition leaders gathered. Their eyes, once cold and calculating, now held a glimmer of respect, tentative but real. The battle had changed everything. The fragile alliance between species, born from necessity, had been tempered in the crucible of conflict and emerged stronger. Kira's voice rang clear as she addressed them, a call to unity and purpose that transcended language and difference. "We fight not as separate races, but as one force," she declared, her words carrying the weight of experience and hope. "Our enemies seek to divide us, to conquer through fear and isolation. But together, we stand unbreakable. I will lead this fight not just with skill, but with heart. For every lost friend, every shattered dream, we will rise." The council nodded, the unspoken promise of solidarity sealing their pact. Kira felt the enormity of what lay ahead, but she no longer faced it alone. Her identity, once a secret she buried deep, was now a beacon, a symbol of resilience, redemption, and the enduring power of courage. As the fleet prepared to jump to the next system, Kira stood at the observation window, watching the stars blur into streaks of light. The galaxy stretched infinite and wild, a canvas for a new story written in the bold strokes of rebellion and hope. She was no longer the woman who had hidden in the shadows. She was a pilot, a leader, a survivor, and the universe was hers to reclaim. The vastness of space had always been both a prison and a promise for Kira Voss. Now, as she stood aboard the command bridge of her flagship watching the stars rush past in streaks of white light, she felt neither trapped nor adrift. She was free. Free to face her past, free to forge a future, free to lead. The war was far from over. There would be battles yet to fight, sacrifices yet to be made. But Kira was no longer the woman who had hidden in the shadows for 8 long years. She had been reborn in fire and steel, tempered by loss and driven by hope. She was a pilot once more, not just of a ship, but of destiny itself. Her crew gathered around, their faces tired but radiant with newfound purpose. They were bound by more than duty now. They were united by trust and a shared vision of freedom. Together, they would chart a course through the darkness, their courage a beacon for all who yearned to break their chains. Kira closed her eyes briefly, feeling the steady rhythm of the ship beneath her feet and the infinite possibility ahead. She opened them again, sharp and clear, ready to lead the charge into a future where shadows could no longer hide the light. In the endless sea of stars, her name was no longer whispered in regret or fear. It was spoken with reverence, a legend reborn. Kira Voss, the pilot who vanished, who hid, who returned stronger than ever to reclaim the skies. And as the fleet surged forward, slicing through the cosmos toward the next battle, Kira knew this was only the beginning of a story that would be written among the stars, one of redemption, resilience, and the unbreakable spirit of a pilot who refused to be forgotten.